17 people woke up on the same morning, unable to understand a single word of human speech. They could hear perfectly. Every sound registered normally. Traffic, music, birdsong, machinery, everything except the human voice. When people spoke to them, they heard only noise, meaningless, like listening to wind through trees or water over rocks. This is the archive of Project Gamma, the program that tried to understand what happened to those 17 people. The program that failed, the program that created 43 more. The official record is 6 pages, dated November 1983. Classification level that requires 3 separate authorizations to access. Project Gamma, Neurological Research Division, Moscow Institute of Cognitive Sciences, September 1983 to February 1984. Investigation into spontaneous acquired auditory agnosia affecting multiple unrelated subjects. Conclusion: viral etiology suspected but unconfirmed. Program discontinued due to lack of reproducible results. That's the sanitized version. The version that doesn't mention what the researchers discovered. The version that doesn't explain why the institute was evacuated and sealed. The version that doesn't account for the 60 people who can no longer hear human speech. Or the 12 who can no longer speak in ways humans can understand. Let me show you what actually happened. September 8, 1983. A factory worker named Viktor Petrov reported to Moscow City Hospital complaining of hearing loss. But his hearing test came back normal. Perfect frequency response across the entire audible spectrum. He could hear a whisper from across the room. He could identify individual instruments in an orchestra recording. But when the doctor asked him questions, Viktor just stared blankly. The doctor wrote a note on paper. Can you read this?
Yes. Why are you making those sounds with your mouth?
Viktor nodded and wrote back those words. The doctor spoke again. What sounds?
Like wind. Like static. Not words. Just noise.
Viktor wrote in response. Over the next 48 hours, 16 more cases appeared across Moscow. All identical. Complete preservation of hearing. Complete loss of speech comprehension. The patients could read, could write, could communicate through text. But spoken language had become meaningless to them. The cases had nothing in common. Different ages, different occupations, different neighborhoods. No shared contacts, no common locations, no apparent connection. Except one detail that the intake nurses noted. All 17 patients reported the same onset time. They'd all woken up at approximately 6:15 on September 8th, unable to understand speech. The KGB took over the investigation within 72 hours. Not because they suspected espionage, because simultaneous identical symptoms across unrelated subjects suggested something worse. Biological agent, contamination, weaponized pathogen. The patients were transferred to a secure medical facility outside Moscow. The Moscow Institute of Cognitive Sciences was tasked with determining the cause. Dr. Elena Komarova was appointed lead researcher. Her first report, dated September 15th, established the basic parameters. All 17 subjects exhibit identical symptomatology. Audiometric testing confirms normal hearing across all frequencies. Brain scans show normal structure and function. Speech production is unimpaired. Subjects can speak clearly and articulately. However, they report that their own speech sounds like noise to them, indistinguishable from environmental sounds. Most significantly, subjects can no longer differentiate between human speech and other acoustic phenomena. A person speaking and a door creaking register as equivalent auditory events. Dr. Komarova designed a series of tests. She played recordings of various sounds, human speech, animal calls, the musical instruments, mechanical noise. The subjects were asked to categorize what they heard. The results were disturbing. One subject, a teacher named Anna Volkova, described a recording of a man reading poetry as metal scraping on metal. Another subject, an engineer named Boris Lebedev, described a woman singing as water dripping in a specific rhythm. They could hear the sounds perfectly. They could describe the acoustic properties in technical detail, but they could not recognize them as human communication. When shown video of people speaking with the sound on, subjects reported seeing mouths moving, but hearing only background noise. When the video was muted and they were asked to read lips, they could do so perfectly. The deficit was purely auditory. The human voice had lost all linguistic meaning. Dr. Komarova's hypothesis was damage to Wernicke's area, the brain region responsible for language comprehension. But the scans showed nothing. No lesions, no abnormalities, no structural changes. Whatever had happened to these people had left no physical trace. Then, on September 23rd, something changed. Subject 7, Viktor Petrov, the first patient to present symptoms, approached Dr. Komarova with a handwritten note.
I'm starting to hear something else. Not speech. Something underneath it. When people talk, there's a pattern. A rhythm. It's not the words. It's something deeper. Something the words are covering up.
Dr. Komarova asked him to elaborate. Victor wrote for 20 minutes, describing what he was hearing. The note became increasingly difficult to follow, the handwriting deteriorating, the sentences fragmenting. The final paragraph read,
The sounds people make when they speak, they're not random. They're not just communication. They're like, I don't have words for this. It's like the speech is a shell and something else is inside it. Something that was always there, but the meaning of the words was hiding it. Now I can hear it. The thing underneath, the real sound.
Dr. Komarova ordered increased monitoring. Over the next week, all 17 subjects began reporting similar experiences. They were hearing patterns in human speech that they'd never noticed before. Rhythms that seemed to encode information beyond the linguistic content. Harmonics that carried meaning independent of words. Subject 12, a musician named Dmitry Orlov, was particularly articulate in his descriptions.
Doctor, imagine you've been listening to a symphony your entire life, but you were only hearing the melody, the main theme. And then one day, the melody disappears, and suddenly you can hear all the other parts. The bass line, the percussion, the harmonic structure. That's what's happening to us. We're not losing the ability to hear speech. We're gaining the ability to hear what's behind it.
On October 3rd, Dr. Komarova made a decision that would define the rest of the project. She asked Subject 12 to describe exactly what he was hearing when she spoke to him. Dmitry listened carefully as she said, "Can you understand me?" He wrote,
I hear a rhythm. 3 pulses, 2 pulses, 4 pulses. I hear overtones at specific frequencies. I hear your breath pattern, your heartbeat in the vibrations of your vocal cords. I hear micro pauses that correlate with your thoughts forming before you speak. I don't hear words. I hear a complex acoustic pattern that contains far more information than the words ever did.
Dr. Komarova realized something profound. The subjects weren't suffering from a deficit. They were experiencing an augmentation. They'd lost the ability to process speech as language, but gained the ability to process it as pure acoustic data. Data that contained information humans normally filter out. She proposed a new experimental framework. If the subjects were hearing additional information in human speech, perhaps they could learn to interpret it. Perhaps they could develop a new form of communication based on these underlying patterns. The research committee approved her proposal. Project Gamma officially shifted from investigation to experimentation. October 15th, Dr. Komarova began teaching the subjects to communicate with each other using the patterns they were hearing. She placed two subjects in a room together and asked them to attempt conversation without writing. The first attempts were failures. The subjects would make sounds at each other, but neither could extract meaning from the other's vocalizations. But by the third day, something started working. Subject 7 and Subject 12 sat across from each other and began making sounds. Not words, not even phonemes. Just tones, rhythms, pulses of breath, and vocal resonance. And after 20 minutes of this, both subjects stopped and wrote identical messages. We understand each other. Dr. Komarova asked them to explain. Both subjects struggled to put it into words. Subject 12 finally wrote,
We're not speaking. We're not using language. We're using our voices to create patterns in the air. Pressure waves with specific characteristics, and we can read those patterns directly without the intermediate step of linguistic processing. It's like we're painting with sound and reading the paintings.
By October 30th, all 17 original subjects could communicate with each other using this new method. They called it direct speech. It was faster than language, more precise. They could convey emotional states, physical sensations, complex, abstract concepts, all through carefully modulated sound patterns. And they could hear things in each other's voices that Dr. Komarova couldn't. They could detect lies. They could sense fear, attraction, doubt, certainty. They could hear when someone was sick before any symptoms appeared. They could identify each other in complete darkness by the unique acoustic signature of their heartbeat and breath. Dr. Komarova's report from this period shows growing excitement. The subjects have developed a form of communication that may be more fundamental than language. They're accessing a layer of acoustic information that exists beneath all human vocalization. This has profound implications for our understanding of consciousness, communication, and the nature of human perception. But then the problem started. November 7th. Subject 3, a woman named Irina Sokolova, refused to be in the same room as Subject 9, a man named Alexei Volkov. When asked why, she wrote,
I can hear what he's thinking, not his words, his actual thoughts. When he looks at me, I hear it in his voice. The sound he makes just by breathing changes based on what he's thinking. And what he's thinking is wrong, predatory, violent. He hasn't done anything, but I can hear his intentions in the way his lungs move.
Dr. Komarova separated the two subjects and interviewed Alexei. His written responses were normal, cooperative, appropriate. But when she had another researcher monitor his breathing patterns and heart rate during the interview, they detected irregularities that correlated with questions about Irina. Micro-accelerations, subtle changes in respiration that might indicate arousal or aggression. Irina had been right. She could hear his thoughts and his autonomous physiological responses. On November 12th, all subjects were isolated from each other as a precaution, but isolation created a new problem. The subjects could still hear normal people speaking, and now they were hearing too much. Subject 7 wrote a disturbing note to Dr. Komarova.
I can't stop hearing what people really mean. Every word has layers underneath it. Lies, fears, hidden desires. The guards who bring me food, I can hear their contempt for me in their breathing. The doctors who examine me, I can hear their curiosity mixed with revulsion. They think we're freaks, mistakes. They want to study us, but they also want us to disappear. And you, Dr. Komarova, when you speak to me, I can hear your excitement, your ambition. You care about the research more than you care about us. We're not people to you anymore. We're data.
Dr. Komarova's response to this note was not included in the official file, but 3 days later she submitted a request to terminate Project Gamma. The request was denied.
You need to understand something. Everyone is lying. All the time. I can hear it. When the gods tell me everything is fine, I can hear their fear. When you tell me this is temporary, I can hear your doubt. When people speak, their words say one thing, but their bodies say another. And I can hear both. It's unbearable. The dissonance between what people say and what they mean. You're all screaming lies, and you don't even know it.
November 18th. 3 subjects attempted suicide. They were restrained and placed under constant observation. When Dr. Komarova interviewed them, they all gave the same explanation. They couldn't tolerate hearing normal human speech anymore. The gap between linguistic content and acoustic reality was psychologically devastating. Dr. Komarova proposed a solution. If normal speech had become intolerable to the subjects, perhaps they needed to be around other people like them. People who communicated through direct speech rather than language. She requested permission to recruit new subjects. Volunteers who would undergo training to lose language comprehension and develop direct speech capabilities. The request was denied. The research committee found the proposal too dangerous, but Dr. Komarova pursued it anyway. On November 25th, she began exposing herself to the original 17 subjects, listening to their direct speech, trying to hear what they heard, trying to lose language. Her research notes from this period become increasingly strange.
Day 3. I'm starting to notice patterns I never heard before. When Victor speaks, there's a low harmonic that corresponds with his heartbeat. When Anna speaks, there's a rhythmic pulse that matches her breath. Day 7. I asked a colleague to read me a newspaper article. As he read, I focused on ignoring the words and listening to the sounds. For just a moment I heard it. The underlying pattern, the real acoustic structure beneath the language. It was beautiful.
Day 12. I'm having trouble understanding my own speech. When I talk, I hear the words becoming hollow, like empty shells around something deeper. On December 3rd, Dr. Komarova woke up unable to understand human speech. She'd succeeded. She'd lost language. She'd become the 18th subject. Her first written communication after the transition was a single sentence. Now I understand why they can't go back. December 10th. The research committee appointed a new lead investigator, Dr. Sergei Baranov. He reviewed Dr. Komarova's notes and made an immediate recommendation. Terminate the project and quarantine all subjects indefinitely. His reasoning was simple. The condition was contagious, not through biological vectors but through acoustic exposure. Sustained contact with subjects who lost language could trigger the same loss in others. Dr. Komarova was proof. But before the quarantine could be implemented, something else happened. December 15th, a guard assigned to the subject's ward, a man named Pavel Rostov, reported unusual symptoms. He could still understand speech, but he was hearing additional sounds when people talked. Extra frequencies, he called them. Sounds that seemed to communicate emotion and intent independently of words. He was the first of what Dr. Baranov termed partial cases. People who developed enhanced acoustic perception without completely losing language comprehension. Within a week, 5 more guards and 3 medical staff reported similar symptoms. Dr. Baranov revised his assessment. The condition wasn't just contagious, it was progressive. Exposure to subjects didn't immediately cause language loss, but it started a process. A gradual enhancement of acoustic perception that eventually overwhelmed linguistic processing. And the process was accelerating. Early subjects had taken weeks to fully transition. Recent cases were transitioning in days. January 4th, 1984. The facility housed 43 people with complete language loss and 17 with partial symptoms. The building was placed under military quarantine. No one in or out without decontamination protocols. But you can't decontaminate sound. On January 11th, residents in the nearest village, 3 kilometers from the facility, began reporting strange auditory experiences, hearing voices that weren't speaking, understanding communication that had no words. The village was evacuated. Dr. Baranov's final report, dated January 20th, is brief and bleak. Project Gamma represents an uncontrolled cognitive contagion event. The condition spreads through acoustic exposure and demonstrates accelerating transmission rates. Recommend immediate shutdown of all research activities and permanent isolation of affected subjects. Recommend destruction of all audio recordings made within the facility. Recommend suppression of all documentation related to direct speech phenomena. On February 2nd, 1984, the Moscow Institute of Cognitive Sciences was evacuated. All staff were relocated. All equipment was destroyed. The building was sealed. 60 people remained inside. 43 with complete language loss. 17 with partial symptoms. All of them continuing to communicate through direct speech. All of them hearing things in each other's voices that shouldn't be possible to hear. The building is still sealed, still quarantined. Officially, it's contaminated with toxic chemicals from improperly stored research materials. Unofficially, it's a cognitive hazard zone. But there are reports. Over the years, people who live near the sealed facility describe hearing sounds at night. Not words, not music, just patterns of sound that seem almost meaningful. That seem to carry intention without language. That make you listen more carefully than you should. In 1991, a group of urban explorers broke into the facility. They recorded their exploration on video. The footage shows empty corridors, abandoned offices, decades of decay. And in the background, on the audio track, you can hear something else. Sounds that might be voices but aren't speech. Patterns that might be communication but aren't language. 3 of the 5 explorers developed unusual auditory symptoms within a month. Difficulty understanding speech. Heightened sensitivity to vocal harmonics. The feeling that human language was hiding something important. All 3 eventually lost the ability to understand spoken language entirely. They can communicate with each other through direct speech, they formed a small community. They lived together in a rural area, far from population centers. They've requested that their location not be disclosed. And they're not alone. There are others, scattered across the former Soviet Union and beyond. People who've lost language, but gained something else. They find each other through sound, through the patterns in their voices that only they can hear. I've been researching Project Gamma for 3 months now, reading the archived reports, listening to the few audio recordings that survived, trying to understand what happened to those 60 people. And I've started to notice something. When people speak to me now, I hear more than I used to. Not just words. I hear the breath between the words, the micro tremors in vocal cords, the rhythm of thought forming before speech begins. I hear emotions that the speaker isn't expressing verbally. Yesterday, my colleague told me she was fine, but I heard distress in the overtones of her voice.
I'm fine.
Frequencies that contradicted the meaning of her words. She was lying, and I could hear it. This morning, I listened to a recording of myself speaking. My own voice sounded strange, hollow, like the words were a mask over something deeper, something that wanted to communicate without the limitations of language. I've stopped listening to the archived recordings. I've stopped reading the case files. I've quarantined the entire Gamma archive in a sealed room. But I think it's too late. I can feel it happening. The words becoming less important. The patterns beneath them becoming clearer. I'm starting to hear what Dr. Komarova heard. What all 60 of them heard. The real sound, the true sound, the acoustic reality that language is covering up. And once you hear it, you can't unhear it. Last night, I tried to have a conversation with my wife. She asked me about my day. I heard her words, but I also heard her heartbeat in the resonance of her vocal cords. I heard her breathing pattern shift when she mentioned a colleague's name. I heard micro-pauses that revealed she was thinking about something she wasn't saying. I tried to respond, but the words felt wrong. Inadequate, like trying to paint a sunset using only 2 colors. The sounds I wanted to make, the patterns that would accurately convey what I was thinking and feeling, they weren't compatible with language. So I stayed silent. She asked if I was okay. I heard genuine concern in her voice, but I also heard fear. The acoustic signature of someone who knows something is wrong, but doesn't want to admit it. I wrote her a note. I'm fine, just tired. She heard the lie in the tone I used when I told her goodnight. I could see it in her eyes. I'm writing this report now because I need to document what's happening before I lose the ability to use written language. Because I think that's next. Once speech becomes incomprehensible, writing follows. The symbolic representation of communication starts to feel as hollow as the spoken words. The 60 people in the sealed facility, they don't write anymore. The most recent surveillance reports note that they've stopped producing any text at all. They communicate entirely through direct speech, through pure acoustic patterns that carry meaning without the intermediate step of linguistic encoding. They've moved beyond language, and I'm following them. I can feel it. Every conversation pushes me further. Every time I hear the gap between what someone says and what they mean, language loses a little more of its hold. Soon, I won't be able to understand these words I'm writing. Soon, I'll only hear the patterns, the real sounds, the truth beneath the lies we call speech. Project Gamma didn't fail. It succeeded. It found something fundamental about human communication. Something we've been covering up with language for thousands of years. Something that exists in every voice, every breath, every vibration of vocal cords. The 60 people in the facility aren't disabled. They're evolved. They've shed the crude tool of language and learned to communicate with the raw acoustic material of human thought. And they're not alone anymore. There's a frequency, I can almost hear it now, a pattern that all of them share. A harmonic that identifies them to each other across any distance. And when I listen carefully in the quiet moments, I think I'm starting to hear it in my own voice too. The sound of joining them. The sound of leaving language behind. The sound of finally hearing the truth. This concludes the declassified materials from Project Gamma. The fate of the researcher who compiled this final report remains unknown. The sealed facility continues to operate under maximum security protocols. The 61 individuals inside remain isolated from the general population. All audio recordings from Project Gamma have been permanently archived. Access requires Level 5 clearance and psychological evaluation. If you are experiencing difficulty understanding spoken language after reviewing these materials, report immediately to your supervising officer. Do not attempt to listen to the archived recordings.